Welcome to the Cumbre Kazpi podcast. Today I'm hosting a 5-time NBA champion as a player, a 3-time NBA champion as a coach, a true champion, but it's not easy to say even a better person off the court. Coach Kurt, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Omri. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you, Coach. And I told you before we start recording is that your name came up pretty much on each one of my podcasts. But there's one story I want to tell the people of Israel and whoever's watching about you as a person. The time was December of 2017. I got an email from a family friend that it was his mom, that the kid was diagnosed with cancer, a very advanced cancer. And they sent me an email that his biggest dream, he loved the Warriors, and it happens, that I was a part of that team. They're taking a trip to San Francisco to see us playing some games. And the kid is just such a big fan of, obviously, you, the team, Steph, and the rest of the guys. And people got to understand, practice facility in NBA manners is like some sort of a temple. I don't remember any team that I played for that allowed anyone into practice facility during the season. And I came up to you and I asked you told you the story about this situation, and you allowed him to come into practice. And in our practice facility, we had a balcony that usually where the guests are staying usually during practice. And you went up there. I'll never forget that. You went up there and you insisted that the kid and his mom would come down and watch practice from the court pretty much with us as players. And just think about the situation, playing for the Warriors with one of the most famous teams of all times. Guys love them all around the world. Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, KD, Draymond, all the rest of the guys are playing. And a kid with cancer is able to experience that firsthand. And I remember we going through practice. I was going through my daily routine, shooting some shots after practice. And I came over post-practice, and I saw you talking to the mom. And I was talking to you and the mom, and I said, I promised to take them to lunch post-practice. And I went to take a shower, and I said, hey, give me 20, 30 minutes. I'll shower, I'll stretch, get my ice, etc. So I'll come back and take them to lunch. So I come back 30, 40 minutes after, and I'm seeing you still there talking to the mom, and both of you with tears in the eyes. I'll never forget that picture. And the next day, you upgraded their tickets, you took them backstage, you got them into the VIP lounge. Clay came over, gave him shoes, signed shoes. And I remember the son just literally with tears in his eyes. And they flew back to Israel a couple of days later. And a couple of weeks after, the kid passed away. He had really advanced cancer. And I don't remember if I ever told you thank you for doing this, Coach. It's one of the most amazing things I think a human being can do. And just thank you.
Well, thank you for reminding me of the story. I remember it well. I've always felt that the most important thing that we can do as NBA players and coaches is bring joy to people, to our fans, but more importantly to people who are struggling and who need to put a smile on their face. And so I think we've always been really proactive about trying to invite people in to the inner circle, and it's a tricky dynamic, as you mentioned. You're a team, and it's the locker room and the gym is kind of sacred. But I think it's really important to open it up sometimes. Number one, to bring joy to people's lives, and then number two, to remind all of us how lucky we are. To be playing and coaching in the NBA and to do what we do for a living. And so I think moments like that always are very grounding. They're very humbling and very emotional, but they're very important. They're important for all of us. And I'm glad that visit made such an impact on you and on the family. Absolutely. And definitely on me too.
Coach, who influenced you to as a man to behave in such manner? Is anyone in particular?
I think my own father was a very empathetic, compassionate man. So I was raised that way with a lot of compassion, and then I think as a player, playing for Greg Popovich, I felt that sense of obligation to spread the joy that comes from playing basketball with as many people as possible. I think and Pop does it in a different way. You know, he and I are very different people, but we get along. He's one of my best friends. We get along really well. And I learned so much from him. But I think it's important that we, as a team and as individuals, we have perspective on what's going on around the world. And we always keep that perspective and remind ourselves how lucky we are to be doing what we're doing, because most people are out there and they're struggling. There's a lot of struggle, and we have the opportunity to bring joy to people every single day.
No, it is something that it taught me a lot about you as a person, about things that I can be better as a human being. I know my daughters are looking up to me, and I have 2 daughters now, Coach. I have a 3-year-old, Sarai, when she was born right before our season, and I have Esty, who's almost 1 year old now. So just conducting, the humility, I think is such a beautiful trait, and being humble, I think is probably the nicest traits of all. And it can really represent so much about, the Warriors and you as a human being. So thank you so much. Kind of moving in a sharp direction towards, we watched the Michael Jordan, the Last Dance series, obviously, and you played with some amazing teams, and you won 5 NBA championship, 3 with the Bulls. How challenging is it to play with a guy like Michael, which is obviously one of the greatest athletes of all time, but maybe the best of all time? How challenging is it?
Well, it was challenging, but I think one of the themes from that team, and I'm not sure it was really covered or described this way in The Last Dance, in the documentary, but it was a very mature team. So we had a lot of guys who understood that the team was different because Michael Jordan was different. He lived a different life, and he led like nobody else led. He was very hard on all of us, right, from time to time. And I think a younger team would not have handled it well at all. But we had a lot of guys like myself who had been in the league for, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe even longer. And we went into it knowing, the deal was we had to put up with Michael and the way he treated us and the way he drove us. Mm-hmm. And on the other side of the deal, we were going to win the championship. We just knew because he was that good. Right. And so it was really an easy deal. I'll take that deal any day of the week. Because as hard driving as Michael was, he was fair. He worked just as hard as anybody, if not harder. And so you just sort of had to accept this dynamic that it was going to be difficult, but as long as you went in, you worked hard, you were going to be part of a championship team, and that's what everybody wanted.
Oh, it's something that I saw the NBA is going through some sort of a transition. I don't know if you agree with that, but when I got to the league in 2009, the league was a little bit different. The locker rooms were a little bit different. I think even when I came to play for you, I think when me and you talked for the first time was July 1st, most of the conversation was about how would you deal adversity and how would you deal times where you won't play as much or you won't play at all. And you might have a good game and the next day or literally on a back-to-back you won't play. How would you conduct it and how would you be as a professional? Do you think the NBA has done some transition towards more maybe even I don't say that back then the locker rooms weren't as healthy, but having better personalities in the locker room, which changed a little bit?
I think in general it's a younger league. It's a different generation. It's a different dynamic that exists now. So, and when you arrived with the Warriors, we had a veteran team. Right. It was. I don't think it was representative of what most of the NBA looked like. And I remember that conversation very well. I said, how would you handle it if if I didn't play you, and you had the right answer, which was you were going to work hard no matter what, and then you followed through with that, and that's exactly how you conducted yourself all season. And I think if you can find people like that, like yourself, like David West, like Sean Livingston, guys who are real professionals, especially these days when the league is younger and players are maybe not as patient waiting their turn. I think there's a real advantage to having that kind of veteran presence.
So today you're a coach, and it's a little bit different. And getting into the head of more being a coach, is it more fun or more challenging to be a coach or a player? How'd you take that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think anything is as fun as playing. Playing basketball is there's this beautiful freedom that you feel from the movement and the flow and the energy, and you get older and your body starts to hurt, and it's tougher to get out of bed, and so being young and athletic and free, there's nothing like that. But for me, coaching is an absolute joy. I love to coach. It's a different challenge. As a player, I was basically worried about myself, and I just had to take care of my own situation every day. As long as I, got my workout in, got my rest, did my job, I knew I'd be fine. But now as a coach, I'm more responsible for more people. And so in some ways it's more satisfying because you get to impact more people along the way, but you also miss that opportunity to play and really feel free on the court.
Coach, one of the things that was really surprising to me, and it was different than any other team, is the way you dealt with adversity, the way you dealt with challenges during the year, the way our practices were, and the pressure, and how fun it was to play. I think obviously you touched a little bit that we had a veteran team. Most guys were 7, 8, 9 years in. They knew how to prepare to a game or to a championship game for that matter. And there's always this debate, which one is that the coaches really need to demand the players and to practice really hard and stuff like that. But on the other hand, and you proved it, and I think a lot of teams now are doing it more and more. It's like more days off and more giving the players the freedom to prepare their own themselves. How did you come about that and to kind of go in that direction?
Well, I had a really good upbringing as far as coaching is concerned. I played for 4 different Hall of Fame coaches during my career. Lute Olson in college, and then Lenny Wilkins with Cleveland, Phil Jackson with Chicago, Greg Popovich with the Spurs. So I played for all these amazing coaches, and I learned so much from them. And I think just trying to watch and absorb and listen. And then before I started coaching, I really reached out to those guys, but also to other coaches in different sports, and they all told me the same thing. Every coach I talked to told me the same thing, that you have to be yourself. The players will feel your authenticity. If I tried to be Greg Popovich, it would not work. Or if I tried to be Phil Jackson, it wouldn't work. Right. So I had to be myself, and I always felt as a player and as a person, I performed my best when I was competing, but I was having fun at the same time, and trying to find that balance, trying to walk that line. And that's what I've always tried to achieve as a coach is let's compete, and let's take every bit of joy out of every day that we're together, because we're playing basketball and it's supposed to be fun. And I think it's possible to achieve those two things at the same time. And that's what I try to teach and to all my players and my teams.
And dealing with guys and egos, obviously at that magnitude of a team, I think the team was probably the most famous team, or second to the Bulls of the 90s with the Warriors, so loved around the world. And the way you dealt you obviously demanded everyone, right? You're one of the guys, and players respect that. You demand from everyone, and you confront everyone. I remember, you confronting the 15th guy or the number one guy, not necessarily in a bad way, but you demanded from everyone. As a coach and as a leader, I'm just thinking out loud. Is it? There's certain ways to get to different players. Obviously, the ground base is demanding and competing and on both ends, etc. But on a personal level, talking to Clay or Draymond, is it a different conversation?
Totally different. It's different for every single player. But the one thing that has to be constant is just honesty. No player wants to hear BS,
Right.
Every player wants the truth,
right.
But I think you have to understand how to speak to that player and how to appeal to that player. So, for example, you mentioned Clay and Draymond. Yelling at Clay does not work. If you yell at Clay, he kind of goes into his shell and he doesn't play his best. And so with Clay, it's more, let's talk this out. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm thinking you could do. And then you take Draymond. Draymond actually plays his best when I yell at him because he's a very emotional person. He's very raw. And so he and I, you remember this, Draymond and I, probably three times every year, we get into it and we scream and yell at each other. And then afterwards we hug it up. So it's a different dynamic with each player, but I think that's why it's so important for the coach to try to get to know his players individually as best he can before he tries to coach them. No,
I completely agree, especially when players, they respect honesty, and when your coach is first of all demanding from everyone the same way, and he's being honest with you about the way you do your business and what needs to be done, is something that as a professional we have to respect. That's the number one, I think, wish for every player to have from his coach. When honesty comes into play, I think you can really perform. I think that the group we had and the group you guys have with the Warriors now is just a really quality group of guys on and off the court, which I think it's a total organization, I think, but I think Steph has a very vital role in the way the business is being conducted in the arena. And Steph is just to me just an unbelievable player and a person. And I think he set the tone for the organization in many ways.
I think you're exactly right. I think Steph is one of the most amazing people I've ever been around because he's so talented and so gifted, so hardworking, and yet so humble. So people like being around him, whether it's his teammates or the training staff or people in the organization. And Steph is a perfect example of finding that balance that I just talked about, of being competitive but being joyful at the same time. You watch him during games, nobody has more fun playing basketball than Steph. Right. But you remember well, Omri, how competitive Steph is and how tough he is. And so striking that balance and doing it with so much empathy for people and being aware of his power. We talked about the visitors that you had to our facility in the beginning of the podcast, and I would see Steph almost every day, just being so magnanimous, so nice to people, visitors at games, at practices, people outside hotels. He's just a nice person. And when you're that powerful as a human being, but that genuine and that nice, it's an amazing combination of talent and ability.
Coach, if you had to compare the 90s Bulls to the Warriors, I know you've been asked that many times, and let's even split it to two, offensively and defensively. How do you think those two teams is probably the best teams of all times playing the game of basketball?
Yeah, I've been asked that question before, and it's difficult because it's two different eras, and
right.
I think, the hardest thing for people to really grasp is that the rules were very different in the 90s than they are now. And so defensively, everything was very different. The things that we do now, that we teach our team, that you learned in your time in the NBA, all that stuff was illegal back in the 90s. For example, you get a switch, and now everybody is switching these days. If you switch and the guard is now guarding a big man down on the low block, from the weak side, Draymond can just run over and switch and take that guy, and the guard can just run to the other side of the floor. That used to be illegal defense. And so nobody used to switch back in the day. And so between that and all the three-pointers that are shot now compared to back then, it's really a very different game. I will say this, the Bulls in the 90s were probably best suited to play today's game because of the versatility defensively. I wouldn't have been out on the floor much.
Because you're the best shooter.
Well, I could shoot, but defensively, it's so, the NBA has gotten so difficult. You have to, every person has to guard one-on-one because people are just going to put you in pick and roll. And so, but that team had Ron Harper, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Tony Kukoc, Dennis Rodman. They could really all guard multiple spots. It was a very modern basketball team.
If I look at them defensively, and I'm thinking of the Bulls, and you have Michael, Scottie, and Dennis, and I think even some would argue that Michael wasn't the best defender or a team defender on that group, which is unbelievable length and athleticism on one group. On the other hand, I compare them to the Warriors. You have, Clay, Draymond, and KD or even Andre at some rotation, and Sean. It's the length and the switching opportunities and the capabilities are just endless on the defensive side.
Yeah. Very, very similar defensively, and I think Phil Jackson always valued big guards. He loved wings who were long and athletic, and in many ways he was ahead of his time because now everybody values that length on the perimeter. But that team was very capable of guarding the modern teams that spread you out and shoot threes and penetrate. The big difference really would be just the number of threes offensively that each team would take. I think back then, we had maybe 3 or 4 guys on the team who would take threes. Tony Kukoc, Scottie Pippen, and me, and we would each take maybe 3 or 4 a game. Michael would take 1 or 2.
Right.
Maybe 1 or 2 other guys would take 1 or 2. We would take 15, probably 15 threes in a game. And now that's 1 quarter,
right.
For us with the Warriors in many games. We usually will be up around 40 threes per game these days. So it's just such a different approach. And the game is so spread out. A lot of people say, the game used to be more physical. And it's true, but one of the reasons it was more physical was because it was played, like this.
Right.
Whereas today's game is
so
really spread out.
Right.
And so it's less physical because there's just more space.
Where do you think the game is going from this point on? When I started my time in the league, I remember that was the time with Kendrick Perkins and KG with the Celtics, or Pau Gasol and Andrew Bynum, and centers. And really, centers and power forwards. And today, with you guys, and the Rockets have taken it to the extreme, playing with 5 guards sometimes. That's where you think the evolution of the game will go, and if so, what will be of the center position going forward?
Yeah, it sure feels like that's where the game is going, and if that's the case, then maybe what it means is the 5 men. The modern center will also be able to shoot threes. And in some cases, teams are already featuring centers who can shoot. I mean, you look at Marc Gasol.
Right.
He didn't used to be a three-point shooter, but now he can step out and knock down a shot. I still think there will always be a place for the big man in the game because you have to be able to protect the rim, and but it has to be someone who's mobile, who can get out on the perimeter a little bit and switch and guard guards, and then at the other end step back and make a three. So it's changing the way that the young big men are being taught. You know, very, very few young big men have footwork down on the low post to turn and score. Now, more often, you're seeing young big men step outside and shoot a lot of threes, and I think that's where the game is going, where you're going to have all five guys be able to shoot a three.
Coach, is it easier to win the first championship or the third?
That's a great question, Omri. I think the first one is very difficult because you don't really know how to do it and if you can do it. So I think the second one is easier in some ways, but then that's when fatigue comes in, and that's why I like your question. Because you didn't say what's easier, the first or the second. You said the first or the third.
Right, the third one. Right.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about. By the third one, I think everybody's exhausted, and I think that might be the hardest thing for fans to really understand is just how exhausting it is to play a full 9-month season, you know, with 2 months of playoffs. And it's not just the physical exhaustion, it's the emotional exhaustion of every single day. Even on your off day in between playoff games, there's high stress. You're thinking about the next game, and you finally win that series, you move on to the next series. And so it's very, very tiring, I think, in many ways. So I think the third one is actually a little bit tougher than the first one.
And you touched it a little bit in your answer, is that going through NBA finals and being a coach is different than being a player. When us players, sometimes when we playing through the game, we got to do our job. We know our rotation most of the times we're playing. We know the tendencies of the players. As a coach, there's got to be a million things going through your head: rotation, pressure, this player's effort, or this defensive lineup, this defensive segment, and what are we doing? And take me a little bit behind the scenes and some of your thought process going through NBA Finals decision making, in game, before game, post games.
Sure. So our staff in the playoffs, we have 10, 11 people in our staff meeting, and we'll meet in our facility, and we have a room that has it's like the walls, you can write on the walls, it's like a giant grease board, and we will just start writing thoughts and ideas, matchups, things on the wall to prepare for that opponent. And by the end of a series, we have 3 walls filled with writing and notes and ideas and lineups. And then when you get through that series, you just erase everything and you start over. And so by the time you get to the finals, it's almost like a routine, and the first day of the next series, somebody brings donuts and we're all sitting around for 2 hours writing on the wall. And but you learn, I think, during every series, the games 1 and 2, you really get a feel for your opponent, and that's when you start to make adjustments if you need to make them. And obviously you watch a ton of tape. I think the biggest pressure as a coach is, you're going to make decisions that are going to be criticized one way or the other if you lose. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like being a player. You have to, as a player, I realized, it took me a while, but I realized I had to just go for it, right? If I take the shot and I make it, people are going to say, I'm a hero. If I miss it, I'm the GOAT, right? And it's a similar dynamic as a coach. You have to be willing to put your neck out there and make tough decisions with full awareness that they may not work, and if they don't, you're going to take a lot of heat for it, and that's okay. I think that's part of being a coach. You just have to learn to accept criticism and not worry about it, because if it were easy, anybody could do it. But you have to make some judgments, and you make a decision, and you don't look back. But you're in the limelight. You're going to be exposed if you make a decision that doesn't work.
And it's obviously being in NBA Finals. Every decision has such an influence on the world now. The game is so globalized. I remember us playing at Christmas Day, going back into my Twitter account. It was just people in Israel watching the game and commenting and all that. And it's just different times. When I started playing in the league, Twitter was just the beginning of it. Now the game is just so globalized. Every play is being replayed 100 times, and it puts a lot of pressure on players, I think, on many ways, and obviously coaches as well. That literally every decision you make is being judged.
Yeah, it was when I played. It was actually a lot easier, Omri, because Twitter didn't exist.
Right.
When I was with the Bulls, that was right around the time cell phones were invented. So the first part of my NBA career, nobody had a cell phone, and so you didn't hear all this instant feedback and criticism and judgment. You had to search for it if you wanted it. You could listen to talk radio in your car, or you could just get the morning newspaper, your local paper. And I remember I had a really interesting moment. It was my first year in Chicago. I was trying out for the team. I had a non-guaranteed contract, and I was trying to win a spot on the roster. And I was having a really good training camp. I was playing really well. And I was at the gas station, and again, no internet, right? So the only news you could get was in the paper. So I saw the Chicago Tribune when I went up to to get gas. So I went in, paid for the Tribune. I thought, maybe they're going to say something nice about me. I'm having a good camp, right? And so I open up the sports page, and it says Steve Kerr is likely to be cut.
Wow.
And my heart just sank, right? And the next day I had a horrible practice. My energy was bad. I was wondering what are the coaches thinking? I thought I was playing well. All these negative thoughts entered my head, and I realized, why am I doing this? Like it took life out of me. And so I made a really easy decision at that point, which was, don't read the Chicago Tribune. And don't listen to talk radio.
The problem today just follows you everywhere. It's literally
follows you, and you have it in the palm of your hand, and everybody has access to you, whether it's your friends or your family, or people out on Twitter who've never met you. I don't know how you guys do it, honestly. I think it's never been more difficult to be a professional athlete than right now.
I think this is why, and I've had a interesting podcast about mental health. This is why I think this discussion of mental health, and from a very young age, for some reason, especially here in Israel, the discussion of mental health is when there is a problem, you should start dealing with it. But I think you should start at a very young age, start to build this foundation of dealing with criticism and good things and bad things, how to map the situation better, and how to respond to a situation better. And in many cases, and I think having a tough mental healthy health, in a sense, it can make you just a better citizen, a better person, a better father, a better athlete. And I think this discussion is so important.
I think it's crucial, and obviously it goes way beyond sports. It's just, if you're a young person growing up, you think about just as you're maturing and you're trying to figure out your identity and your place in the world, and how difficult that is for young people to be receiving this kind of judgment and criticism, because we know what's happened with social media is people write things from the safety of their computer or their phone that they would never say to somebody's face.
Right.
And so because of that, we have access to all these negative thoughts and judgments. And, you know, I try to picture myself at 15 or 16 dealing with that. And there's no way I would have been a mess. And so you're right. There's a mental health component to all of this that I think undoubtedly has a lot to do with the state of the world right now. I know we're all dealing with this pandemic, but I think our problems go much deeper than just a virus. I think there's a big problem with being divided by modern technology in many ways, and we have to figure out how to navigate that.
No, I think it's definitely a discussion worth having on many levels. And today, the coronavirus just expedited the whole thing. People got to deal with so many different issues from health perspective, for being away from work and dealing with, you know, being fired from a work or working from home, or, you know, having a wife at home and kids, and deal with that pressure, and your business going out of going bankruptcy, etc. There's so many different things. And pressure on your shoulders, and how do you deal with all that? It's life. It's heavy sometimes, and I think it's worth having this discussion, because we all going through stuff. I was going through stuff. I remember being cut from the Warriors. I was at the top of the world, and, you know, I'm being honest. It's the dream of my life, playing for the Warriors and competing for an NBA championship. And, you know, things happen, and you get hurt, and the team has to go in a different direction. And I remember our conversation in the locker room, and you gotta, you know, step up and deal with the situation and look for the good things in your life. And, you know, thank God I had a wife and family to support me. And I was also thinking, you know, it's part of life. You got to take the good with the bad, and starting to put this good thoughts in my brain and deal with it the right way, and get back the next day to treatment and to take care of your body, and come back next year hopefully better. And we're all going through it. And it's not just sunshine and rainbows out there, you know, especially when you're at the top. It's hard, and we all dealing with it. And one of the things that bother me, you know, about next year is that a lot of people write off my Warriors. It bothers me. I think a team being coached by Steph Curry is a healthy point guy, God willing, no injuries, and Clay coming back, and Draymond, and you guys just had Andrew Wiggins, and hopefully top 5 pick, and you guys have a good team. No pressure, no added pressure, and it's not going to make any headlines. But you guys are so good. I got you guys, and I'm so excited.
We're excited. We're hoping, you know, that obviously that everything goes well with the pandemic, and you know, we're not going to Orlando this month, but. You know, we're hoping that everything goes smoothly in Orlando, and that everybody can start next season safely and in a healthy manner. And you guys too over there, and you know, obviously all over the world. There's just so many questions for everybody. What's life going to look like in the fall? And so we're hoping we can play. But, you know, assuming we're back. We are excited about our team, you know, getting Steph and Clay back healthy, and adding Andrew Wiggins, and then, you know, we have a high draft pick because we struggled this year, and so we're going to be able to add another good player in the draft. So we're excited about next season for sure.
Where do you source your energy, obviously being a champion for so many times and being the leader of this team? I know one sentence of yours to the team can really change the whole mindset of the team. Where is your source of energy and enthusiasm coming from?
Well, I think we've been able to use this time to reconnect at home with family. I think, you know, talking with the players, everybody has kind of felt the same way. All the older veteran players have felt the same way, that, you know, it's just we had such a long run, a 5-year run, where there was so much pressure. And so the benefit of this pandemic, of the quarantine, has been we've been able to stay home and reconnect and re-energize. And I think now, even though we have a long way to go before next season starts, I think all of our players are feeling excited about playing again. This past year was very difficult in many ways, but we made it through. And in a lot of ways, I was very proud of the team because despite the injuries and losing, the players maintained a good energy and a good spirit. So I think it bodes well for next season.
I hope so. One of the things that your team, obviously you being the leader of that team, has brought to the game of basketball is a big joy for so many fans around the world. Saying the Beatles of basketball, it was a very true sentiment about our Warriors team. I'm still part of that. In my heart, I'm still part of the team in some capacity. And so many times in my life, in my basketball career, post my time with the Warriors, when I'm going through a certain situation with the team or a new coach, etc., the first thing that comes to mind is what Coach Kerr would do. Coach, you've been a true inspiration to me on and off the court. I learned so much from you. Your text every once in a while when you text me about a game or whatever it is brings a big smile on my face. So I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the opportunity playing for you, for our friendship, and I appreciate you coming on my podcast. Thank you, Coach. Say hi to your wife, your lovely wife and kids, and hopefully see you soon here in Israel. We'd love to have you anytime. There's an opening in our national team, Coach. If you want to come coach for us, it'd be amazing, Coach.
Well,
dream come true.
Thank you, Omri, and right back at you. I think it was so much fun to get to know you and to coach you, and it was it was such a difficult way to finish that season with the injuries, and then having to let you go before the playoffs started was just awful. It was just, but you handled it so incredibly gracefully, and I know that you're going to do well with everything that you do because you have a great approach to life and to sports, and so it was a joy for me to coach you. And I want you to say hello to your family as well. Congratulations on having a second daughter. That's wonderful news, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you, Coach. Love you. See you later.
Love you too. Thanks, Om.
This is it for today, Omri Kaspi podcast. My time with Coach Kerr was amazing. He's really a true inspirational person. I really love him. See you guys next time.